Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and part 2 of episode 18 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we continue with January 1968 and the Swedish and Danish gigs following the Gothenburg arrest. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Friday, the 5th of January, Jernvallen Sports Hall, SANDVIKEN, Sweden. The experience travels from Gothenburg to SANDVIKEN, where they go to the Stads Hotel, where Jimi is interviewed for the newspaper EXPRESSEN, published January 6, 1968. In the evening, the experience gives a concert at 8:30 p.m. at the Sportshallen in SANDVIKEN, with the groups Mäki Markmen and Baby Grandmothers, but Jimi has to interrupt his show after 35 minutes. He suffers from a sore throat. Noel recalled, "Mitch and I talked about how shaky things were getting before the gig, and Jimi confirmed our doubts by begging off with a sore throat after only 35 minutes. He, like the rest of us, had reasons for being depressed and upset, but his periods of moodiness were stretching out. We were all pissed off and worked our frustrations out on each other, because we had no one else close at hand. Management was remote, to say the least, so who better to scream at but each other? Friends and fans couldn't understand. To them, everything was going great, and complaints were simply crazy. The only relief from loneliness came in the form of girls and dissolution." Concert review SANDVIKEN. Jimi Hendrix Tame in SANDVIKEN, the idol with arm in bandage. Review by Alf Lundqvist for Untitled. If there was something mysterious with Jimi Hendrix's drinks in Gothenburg, which according to his own view, was partly why he smashed thousands of crowns worth of furniture in a hotel room, he himself was a far cry from being okay at the performance in SANDVIKEN this Friday night. It was an extremely subdued, perhaps also down, pop idol, with one arm in a bandage from going berserk in Gothenburg, that took to the Jernvallen stage. When the greats of the pop world visit Sweden, SANDVIKEN in general gets a slice of the pie, thanks to Hogbo. The British pop singer Jimi Hendrix's performance at Jernvallen was experienced by around 1,200 youths. For the audience in SANDVIKEN, Jimi Hendrix's show turned into a disappointment. The speedy tempo that made him world-renowned was missing this evening. Was it perhaps the incident the day before in Gothenburg that had the singer going on idle? During his visit to Gothenburg, Jimi Hendrix ran amok in a hotel and caused several thousand crowns worth of damage. The police took his passport, and he was obliged to report every day. The pop singer was still allowed to make his way over to Copenhagen and go through with his show. The tour manager Eddie Larsson commented on the incident to the Arbetarbladet in this way. Jimi Hendrix explains his actions in Gothenburg with being very intoxicated. "We have never seen him like this before. Jimi was exhausted, down, and his nerves were on edge. Booze on top of that hardly improved on the situation. The incident is now rectified. Hendrix can however expect being charged for the damages." It was to big cheers and great expectations the pop singer and his two accompanists entered the Jernvallen. But from the first moment you noticed that all wasn't well with Hendrix this night. The guitars were out of tune, and at first there were short intermissions between songs. Jimi Hendrix is, as you know, not handsome to behold, but no one can deny his skills as a guitarist. A bandage on his right wrist that told about the incident in Gothenburg didn't improve his guitar playing. All in all, the expectations went up in smoke, but the young audience could comfort itself with the fact that SANDVIKEN, yet one more time, had had one of the greats visiting. The whole evening was psychedelic, with two Swedish pop groups as openers. Mäki Markmen, one of the most interesting groups to emerge in Sweden last year, were disappointed with their show at the Jernvallen. Their intentions were to put on a psychedelic light show, which was almost immediately cancelled. The house was put into darkness, and Mäki Markmen performed solely in the light from a projector with coloured lenses, with light beams slowly sweeping across the band. The light show was interrupted, however, as it was deemed unhealthy for the young audience. Mäki Markmen's manager Michael Solberg said afterwards, "I feel sorry for the audience. The whole performance of Mäki Markmen was ruined this way. Our light show has never been cancelled before." It was a calm and well-behaved audience attending the show. Only incident was when a few kids broke the lock of the handball locker door, and some kids also sneaked in without paying admission. The show started with the Stockholm group Baby Grandmothers, who unfortunately were of low quality. This is how Jimi responds to questions about the tour and the Gothenburg incident to the EXPRESSEN magazine. I will perform in Stockholm, and on Tuesday then we'll be back in Gothenburg to clear up this incident. Something like this has never happened before. Someone must have put some kind of tablet in my glass, otherwise I would never have become like that. Everything has gone so fast, I have never had a chance to relax. I want peace and quiet, and maybe write the pop musical I have in mind. Saturday the 6th of January. The band traveled to Copenhagen in Denmark and stay at the Nordland Hotel. While in Copenhagen, they were recorded on Danish television and interviewed by CARSTEN for EXPRESSEN, with the interview published January 8, 1968. Jimi Hendrix is also interviewed by Franz Secher in his hotel room for Nyborger. For the Ekstrabladet newspaper by CARSTEN, I was just drunk, says Jimi Hendrix in reference to the recent vandalism episode in Sweden. The author goes on to say, Jimi Hendrix has a reputation of being a violent, impulsive man who burns guitars on stage, sleeps with them, and lastly, steps on them. Now he has got the reputation of being an ungovernable man off stage after the just-mentioned furniture smashing episode at a Swedish hotel the other day. But in reality, Jimi Hendrix is a gentle, friendly, and chatty guy who would not harm a cat, but just wants to sit and dream his Technicolor and stereo dreams from where he gets his inspiration. You can sit with him for several hours, as I did last Saturday, and talk nicely. Then suddenly his expression disappears and he has gone into a dream, just to return and tell a fabulous story about... Jimi replies, I had a dream about two little dancers dressed in white. That's possibly going to be a new track on the next album. When asked about the furniture smashing, he says, Man, I was just drunk. That can happen to anybody, but because you throw a couple of things through a window in a sudden madness, it doesn't hit the front pages. That is the hard side of being a public person. You can't rock your ears without somebody making a story out of it. With the exception of a gash with 6 stitches and a row of missing buttons, Hendrix had forgotten the episode due to his... Jimi explains it this way. I have stereo dreams, which are all about writing modern mythology about the earth, space, eternity, and closeness in an LP form. I have also thought about changing our stage act completely. In future, I will present a stage play with colors, which is going to play one part, dancers and other groups who are going to play different parts, and we will play different parts, either with or without instruments. I would like to have Procol Harum with me. They look like a troupe of Shakespeare actors when they get on stage. So we have this to look forward to. A Sgt. Hendrix Pepper Band. Review by CARSTEN. All at once the audience appeared. The same audience who in 2 days bought all the tickets and convinced everybody that beat music is far from dead after all. They were there with rounds of applause like a hurricane, with expectations, with roars of enthusiasm that ran through the hall like a wave from the North Sea, even before the curtains went up. Jimmy, Mitch and Noel were there with a barrage of noise, at least rivaling the roaring surf of the Atlantic Ocean. A soul-tearing current of tones, movements and sounds, which make one completely forget time and place, who one is and why one is, and on what planet one is. One even forgets to listen because this music, or rather this enormous tension, as it can be described, doesn't hit the ears. It hits the whole body and scours every inch. Right after, when the last heavenly trips, the last assaults of the guitar, bass and drums are over, one comes down completely exhausted with a blessed little smile. It was indeed Sgt. Hendrix's Pepper Band that got us all singing along, though it was impossible to follow. But then this Beatles melody has never been heard in a more hypnotizing version. With a bang from what seemed to be 100 amps into Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire, Hey Joe, the slow blues catfish, which got turned upside down for every possible fantastic nuance, gentle and hard with aggressive color explosions from Jimmy's futuristic guitar, and a wild drum solo from Mitch's Wind Cries Mary, Purple Haze, which really was purple, and the desperately beautiful Spanish Castle Magic, and then Wild Thing, which really was wild, and where Jimmy made his guitar say, thank you, to the audience. It was indescribable, although the breaks between the songs at the first show last night were too long and brought down the intensity. The experience can make that inexplicable intensity that Hendrix closely weaves stand visible in the air as well as in the breaks, when none of the instruments makes any noise. Sunday the 7th of January, Tivoli Concert Saal, Copenhagen for 2 shows. First show set list, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Fire, Hey Joe, The Wind Cries Mary, Purple Haze, Spanish Castle Magic, Catfish Blues, and Wild Thing. Between shows, Jimmy spends time backstage for interviews, one conducted by Klaus Hanning for EXPRESSEN, published on January 8, 1968, and the second interview conducted by Søren Sørensen for the Amateurs International School magazine. Jimmy also participates in photo sessions with Veronica Hjort and John Venstrup for the Berlingske Tidende concert review by Jørgen Christiansen, titled Den Grim Amerikaner, or The Ugly American. After week concerts in December in Tivoli's Konsertsaal with The Move and the Electric Prunes, regarding audience attention, it was nice to see that the pop audience came out to see the exciting American guitarist Jimi Hendrix, who gave a concert last night in Tivoli with his group, The Experience. But it was of course the ugly American with the woolly hair, Jimi Hendrix, people had come to see. His guitar space trips were wild and rough, exactly like his several hit singles and 2 full albums have shown. Although we, fortunately, did not experience smashed furniture like Jimi Hendrix left in a Swedish hotel, there were lots of well-played pop blues with a massive wall of sound close against the audience. He didn't hesitate for a second, flinging around him sounds from the edge. There was playing with hands and teeth, and the crunches of his tooth enamel were another beautiful effect altogether. Noel Redding on the bass, with fluffy hair like Eric Clapton, and Mitch Mitchell's brilliant playing followed these sound experiments. The concert was a success. For the BT magazine, a review by Sven Weislenberg titled Hendrix is like he's born in an electric guitar. Jimi Hendrix, dark guitarist and singer, knows his instrument so well that one gets the feeling that he was born in an electric guitar. He strums the strings brilliantly, which vibrate through the speaker cabinets so that you drop both hat and glasses. The performance last night in Tivoli's Konsertsaal was so shaking that you couldn't walk straight. Throughout the whole show, the music sounded like a pot of soup at boiling point, constantly bubbling and gurgling, so powerful that the ears flapped and swelled to make room for the wall of sound which comes from the stage. The guitar continuously becomes a more and more important part of him. His playing contains fewer gimmicks than earlier, and he has reduced it to just biting the strings a couple of times, like we eat Shrovetide buns. Besides this, the slow songs were the best, because with them, he puts more feeling and blues into his playing. He appears to become one with his guitar. In his singing, he spits the words out through his teeth. He has more blues in his fingertips than hair on his head, and that says quite a lot. His unruly locks bristle so that he resembles the bushman who lives around the corner. The other main attraction of the evening was Hansen and Carlsen, respectively electric organ and drums, eminent swinging jazz rhythms, absolutely music on a higher level, which, besides the less simple arrangements, was well received by the audience. AKUELT magazine, review by Stefan Larsson, titled Sorcerer Without Spark. The Hendrix concert was a bit of a disappointment. Sergeant Hendrix Lonely Heart Club's band opened the last part of the show in Tivoli's Konsertsaal last night with the Beatles' opening theme from the record with almost the same name. Hendrix had a plaster on his right hand, but had no other marks after the berserk fury in Gothenburg the other day. He had got out of Sweden, and that was the most important thing for us. What you must put up with at a Hendrix concert is that it is impossible to understand a word of what is being sung. Only some moans and sexy voices from the master carry through the thunder, like a kind of fourth instrument. The dangerous, deadly volume from the amplifiers, which by the way buzzed all too much, drowns everything. Furthermore, it was clear that the group was not in good shape, at least at the first show, and played uninspired, and with a well-known routine. Only occasionally did one sense the claw of the lion, a sudden, unexpected guitar chord that cut sharp as a razor through the otherwise muddy theme, playing with a cat-like movement, which made the beat go faster, or the well-known playing on the guitar with the teeth, which last night only lasted a short while. There was too long between the explosions, where one could recognize the genius magician. However, a Hendrix out of shape is still a concert worth going to. The Hendrix routine is more than well. The group demonstrated again vitality and a sense of getting the music swinging, rocking. The nervous fits and starts, which are the image of the group, did not appear in Copenhagen. The sudden outbursts of feeling from a Hendrix, who must be on the brink of having a nervous breakdown, only appeared in glimpses. Instead, the group pumped out almost unbearable sound to the audience, a sound that physically hurt, and is part of the music. But the sound doesn't do it alone. The applause after the concert was deafening. One wonders if part of it was not a thank you for the last outstanding record from the group. Tivoli Concert Review, titled Jimi Hendrix, by WIDEMANN. At the moment at least, Jimi Hendrix in one way or another is a recommended experience for going to beat concerts, even though nothing much may happen musically. The ambience, the brimful, expectant concert halls, and the enormous vitality of young people, who in the breaks promenade in the most fantastic costumes and haircuts. Where else could you see this? As a social phenomenon, it's very interesting. It could also be musically, when one thinks of the many records which have been released lately, especially by American groups. But in the wider view, I don't think that the latest concerts have been very good. Even Cream, the Electric Prunes, or even as it was at Tivoli yesterday, Jimi Hendrix, who had been on the concert poster. Hendrix is somewhat exceptional in almost closed white beat and rock music. As one might expect, and as he also demonstrated yesterday, he has an exceptionally familiar relationship with the blues, but his personality is not insistent, and it appeared quite characteristic that the two most creative numbers he played at the first show were not his own. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Wild Thing. As a guitarist, he has a considerable technique and can especially make use of the long, infinite floating notes that are brought about by very powerful amplification, but the artistic effects are after all the same, as one knows, as Cream's Eric Clapton, apart from the effect hunting, playing with the teeth, God help me, which Hendrix has a disastrous partiality for. His stage appearance was less exhibitionistic, though, than the last concert last spring, but that might be due to the fact that he, and the audience, were bothered by the heavy buzz from the amplifiers all the time. It's okay having excuses and regrets, but when one plays beat music, it ought to be a part of the deal to keep control of the power. Another reason is that it was less rewarding to hear the concert's main attraction than the Swedish organ and drum duo, which for the first short part of the concert performed something that for a debut, Weaning, really deserves support. Those two I would like to see again. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next installment, where we will continue the deep dive into January 1968 of the Hendrix story, including the Scandinavian, French and US gigs, recording for the Electric Ladyland LP, and much, much more. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Finally, thank you so much for your wonderful comments and continuing support. Remember, there's much more of the story yet to be told.